You're all very welcome to Earth Institute's coffee morning. My name is Graham Warren. I'm standing in as today, who was unable to be here. I'm co-lead of the Built and Constructed Environment theme, along with my colleague Shane Donahue from Civil Engineering. And maybe we can just remind you, there are theme meetings for all the different themes over the coming weeks. And if you're in the Built and Constructed Environment theme, then that meeting is on the 6th of December at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So this is the last of the coffee mornings of the trimester and of the year, and I think Taz's email said that this was the 33rd of them of 2020. And if we're lucky in 2021, we may actually get some time to have a coffee morning with real cake rather than just virtual cake as well. But I'd like just to reiterate Taz's thanks to Emily, Roisin, and all the staff of the Earth Institute for their activities over the year and their support of these events. It's a pleasure to introduce my colleague Brendan O'Neill, who's going to give the presentation this morning. Brendan was appointed to a position in the School of Archaeology in 2018, but prior to that was a PhD student with us, working with experimental archaeology and to look at particularly early medieval metallurgy. And his results there really change how we understand some of the physical remains and the traces of early medieval metalworking. He, since 2013, has been the Deputy Director of our Centre for Experimental Archaeology on campus, which many of you may have visited. And I know that the Director of that, Aidan O'Sullivan, is here as well somewhere, but Aidan won't mind me saying that Deputy Director in this sense means actually does all the day-to-day running of the centre as a whole, and is also the coordinator of our MSc in Experimental Archaeology and Material Culture. I'm also delighted to be able to update you that as of 2 days ago this week, Brendan was also awarded the official status of a UCD hero by the UCD Students' Union, and that's the students on that programme seeking to recognise the fantastic work Brendan does, who supported them. So I'm not sure if I can remember all of the people who've spoken in this programme before, but this may be the first time that we've actually been able to introduce a hero to the Earth Institute and ask them please to start their presentation. So Brendan, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Graham, for that very kind introduction. And thank you to the Earth Institute for inviting me to speak today. I want to introduce you to a real life story from the front lines of the climate change emergency, the Samburu region in equatorial Kenya. In this, I hope to touch on some of the direct challenges of environmental alteration for the people in this area and highlight the complex intersections between it and other challenges threatening Samburu people's traditional ways of living. Ultimately, this talk seeks to give a voice to the Samburu people that we met during a UCD field exercise in 2019. This story is based in Kenya, southwest of the Horn of Africa. The Samburu region is located roughly in the north centre of the country, to the south of Lake Turkana, which many of you may be familiar with listening today. Running roughly south from this lake is the Matthews Range. In the southern foothills of this, we find a small, relatively recently established village called Lengasaka, which is where we were based. In the area around this village, away from the road and towards the mountains, you'll find a profusion of inhabited and abandoned settlements, one of which is occupied by Lentipapa Lesotia, his 3 wives, their children and dependents. The Samburu people, as distinct from the region, are pastoralists traditionally, structured into clans where the family is the most important unit. They live in settlements known as manyadas locally, which are essentially dispersed farmsteads. Manyadas are typically comprised of an enclosing perimeter of thorny scrub, several houses made in a vernacular style, animal pens, and empty spaces where animals are milked. And if you look in the bottom right-hand corner image, you'll see a drone shot of one of these settlements. It's quite typical of settlements more generally. We were there in the summer of 2019 as part of a pioneering teaching initiative coordinated by Samantha Martin McAuliffe and Alice Clancy of UCD School of Architecture to teach students about Samburu vernacular architecture and construction from the house or Nkaji builders themselves, the Samburu women. UCD's team for this, what we call a learning lab, was made up of students and staff from disciplines including architecture, ecology, archaeology, which I'm part of, world heritage, and civil engineering. And we used these structures to consider wider intersecting issues, including climate change, gender, health, and sustainability, as well as cultural and natural heritage. And the image in the top center is one of these houses. This is the vernacular houses that we were interested in and used for this project. On our first day visiting the Lesotia Minyata, we were herded towards the shade of a large tree. Over the next 20 minutes or so, chairs and benches began to emerge and people began appearing from all around us, greeting each other, talking and laughing. I had absolutely no idea what was going on. Suddenly, this crowd started to order itself. The Samburu men in one area, the women in another, and the UCD contingent in yet another. We had found ourselves participants in a tribal council with local leaders and officials wanting to welcome us and speak of their experiences and challenges. And you can see in the main image on this slide, this is actually the kind of layout of this tribal meeting with us in the foreground, the women on the left-hand side and the men on the right. Each of these groups in their turns had a chance to speak. And while the dynamics and wider content was extremely interesting, for this talk, I'll only concentrate on a single element, the challenges voiced by the Samburu that were reiterated several times. These were essentially access to water, soil erosion, and access to education for their children. Settlements are moving around less and less. In decades past, they may have moved in a matter of months or a small number of years. More recently, people have tended to settle for as much as a decade in some cases. You would think that to find water, people would move around more, but grazing requires a level of consistency, and so they tend to stay near to where water is almost guaranteed. Also, with wells being established by a number of governmental and non-governmental organizations, people tend to build settlements within walking distance of them. Soil displacement is very pronounced, caused largely by extreme seasonal flooding and exacerbated by overgrazing. And this limits the availability of suitable building ground, feeding into general anxiety about where to build. Erosion is also removing seeds from the ground, making it more and more challenging to find traditional building materials. This is impacting how materials are being used, as well as the forms of the structures themselves. Education brings a huge range of advantages, and it is vital in addressing personal and societal challenges. But what we came to realize is that there are also tensions, and in this context, education is perceived, at least by some, as taking people away from traditional life. To access school, you have to be able to get to one, or leave your family to board. If you are a boy, this removes you from herding duties. If you are a girl, this removes you from domestic duties or marriage. Education can also potentially lead to non-traditional employment, but this is also tricky. It is simply not possible to work in an office and live in a smoke-filled hut on a farmstead. As such, a dichotomy has emerged where you are either traditionally living or not, where you are actively contributing to your culture or you are not, creating obvious tensions within individuals and in the community more generally. It's difficult to really summarize how these factors are changing life for the Samburu, or even to do justice to how vernacular architectural practices are being impacted without producing overly generalized narratives. One case study is how roofing has changed over the last few decades. Traditionally, women made intricately woven sisal mats to cover the roofs, which allowed smoke, for the most part, to permeate. Although these are very time-consuming to produce, and you can see an example on the far left image there of one of these beautiful sisal mats. In more recent years, time pressures such as having to walk further to access water, in the case of the village we were, or the Minyata we were at, it's a 12-kilometer round trip with about 40 kilos of water. or having to take on some of the herding duties typically undertaken by children who are more and more at school. And as well, the normal range of domestic duties has led to the house builders, the women, instead opting for a combination of old clothing and plastics in most cases. And you can see this in the central image there. This is a very typical house that we came across. This is quick and it works well, but makes houses incredibly smoky, which has obvious health implications for adults and of course children. While the answers might seem obvious, change the roof or use different cooking methods, there are cultural factors that must be balanced. Changing the fire would change how people prepare and cook food. Changing the roofing would require additional money and or time. And simply not having smoke in the house would allow termites to infest the wood and make short work of destroying their houses. In our short time there, we talked to and listened to the Samburu. This left me with the clear impression of the interconnectedness of climate, culture, economy, health, ecology, and heritage. It made me optimistic as the Samburu are proven innovators and adapters. But the sheer number of challenges also made me worry for the sustainability of their traditional way of living. Quick fixes or tackling issues as independent modules cannot work, as there are so many interconnected elements. As researchers and academics, we can play our part together with governmental and non-governmental organizations, but we must allow contextual and cultural priorities to be directed by the Samburu. The rewards for us all are strategies to address our shared global challenges. The dangers of not integrating our responses or balancing contributing factors are that we will soon only be left with the remains of these vanishing houses. Thank you very much.
Very much, Brendan. It's fantastic. A really wonderful demonstration of that very interconnected weave of climate, culture, economy, heritage, and ecology. And I think your list had one more on which I failed to scribble down in time. I'm sure there will be questions and comments. I'd encourage you please to either draw attention to yourself by using the chat or by waving or signing. And if people can help me keep an eye out for those who might be asking questions, that'd be fantastic. If perhaps whilst people prepare those questions, I might just start us off. Brendan, you highlighted there some of the challenges which Samburu communities are facing. Perhaps is there something you could say about some of the opportunities you see that are there as well?
I mean, I think, as I said, it's not for me. There's kind of a balance between optimism and pessimism, and kind of like I said, the Samburu are no strangers to change. Their traditional way of living as pastoralists is to move around a lot. To even they literally deconstruct their settlements and move them either meters or great distances. So one of the chief advantages really of the Samburu people is that they're no strangers to change at all. And even the fact that I only included one of the changes in roof structure. In the roof structure itself, but there's actually been a couple of different iterations in there over time as they've tried to come up with solutions for this. So I think that there's a lot of optimism to be had there, but also the fact that the Samburu reached out to us in that tribal council meeting, for me was very telling. They understand the problems. They see them. They're there. They witness them every day, and they want solutions, but they've been offered solutions. My perception is they've been offered a range of solutions for small parts of this a number of times, but potentially without consultation with them. And so they haven't really worked within their cultural context, but they definitely are still active and eager in pursuing them. So there's definite opportunities for finding solutions, I think. And
that pace of change you talk about there, and that they're so used to change, is it your sense that that's a recent thing, or is that's something with a longer history?
Seems to be something that has a longer history and maybe embedded into being pastoralists. needing to move around, needing to change, literally taking apart your house. And it's interesting, part of the material culture, as an archaeologist I can't resist, part of the material culture of marriage in the Samburu community are things like a kind of I suppose a kind of a yoke for a donkey, and the mats themselves, which are mobile roofing, and the yoke for a donkey is to bring your house and materials away to the new location. So it's manifested in so many different ways within that. I would think that it's a longer term part of the Samburu. Yeah.
Excellent. Any other comments or questions at this stage, or is everyone too busy consuming coffee and cake?
I have a question, if I may.
Yeah, please.
That was really interesting. You mentioned that one of the wants of the people is education for their children, and you mentioned that many of the children are now going to school, and you also mentioned that, of course, the dichotomy that exists afterwards when their youngsters are educated, they then want to, presumably they go and live in town, so they leave these communities. Did you have much of a discussion with the community about how they see their future sort of in 50 years' time? Do they see themselves as disappearing? What do they want to happen?
Sorry. Yeah, no, it's a great question. The people who are living traditional lifestyles, there were, we had to speak through interpreters and things like this, and as well, I suppose you're trying to be sensitive to people and not ask very kind of complicated questions. And also our focus was very much on the houses in the year that we were there, but our interpreters actually were brilliant. These were typically Samburu who were in university and had returned to be our interpreters for that time. And so we did actually, and we became very good friends with a number of them. And they were very forthcoming with the kind of the tensions that exist, and we could ask them lots of different questions. And there was one of our interpreters, Saddam, and I got talking to him about kind of how he lives and how he sees things, and his kind of, and not to kind of put words in his mouth, but my impression of what he was telling me was that if he lived in a town. And like I said, it's just not possible to live in the smoky hut and work in a bank or go to university or do these things, not only because they're quite remote, but also because there's issues of kind of cleaning yourself and stuff like this that are more problematic. So he said if he lived in a town, he would live as somebody in a town. But when he returned home, then he would live as a Samburu. And you can notice as well in some of the pictures that I think almost everybody, a lot of the people in them were Samburu, but not everybody was wearing Samburu traditional dress. So these would be people who were either in university or lived in the villages. But then there's this wonderful tension then when people go to villages. The closest village when we were there, it has this kind of quite gridded settlement, like that we would expect from a village. You could look at it and know it was a village or a town. But you find some of the houses use acacia scrub enclosures around them as their perimeter, or they'll have a small Nkaji or house kind of in the back of a brick-built house. They kind of have these bits. So there's that kind of traditional leaching into the town as well. And then, but as more and more, I think, as people are drawn away, it just kind of depleting population really of the people who are living in that pastoralist way of living. And I think we didn't get to go too much into it, but my impression when I left was that there's definitely a certain amount of resentment from some people about the traditional life leaving. So some people might not send their kids to school because that would draw them away. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's it's all very kind of an impression at this stage.
Thank you. Very interesting.
Thank you, Brendan. There's a comment from Samantha. Samantha, would you like to address your comment to Brendan?
Thanks. Well, I just want to say thanks so much, Brendan, for doing this for everyone. I think it's been great to get this airing. And I thought maybe this is also a good time for you to tell everyone a little bit about your plans for now. It's next year, since we couldn't do this year.
Yeah, thanks, Samantha. I was hoping for a prompt.
Well, you knew I was going to do that.
Yeah, no, genuinely, I was hoping for it. The September just gone, we had received funding from seed funding from UCD Global and Teaching and Learning, myself and a colleague in archaeology, Claire Cave, and this was to run a project called Building Futures, where we had gone over to Samburu in Kenya and learned from, and we all learned from these Samburu builders, the women in this community, and what we wanted to do was to, for a number of reasons, but also to kind of to reinforce our reciprocal relationship, was to bring over some of these Samburu women to UCD and kind of repeat the exercise here for a new cohort of students, a new year of students. Now, this obviously required a huge amount of planning. So it was this time last year that we were getting funding and putting together plans. Obviously, March happened, and we had to abandon the September plan. But coming hopefully this May or into the summer, we're hoping to start this initiative and project, and it's got a number of different kind of legs in it. But from the point of view of a pedagogic exercise, what we want to do is to treat UCD like our material landscape. We want to bring the students around thinking about materials, how you use them, how you process them. Like, not all sticks are just sticks. They also have different kind of qualities that are advantageous for certain parts of the structure, and then replicate this in the Centre for Experimental Archaeology Material Culture at the Roebuck end of the campus. But directed by these Samburu women. But again, this also gives us a huge opportunity to teach students, to bring students face to face with these issues of climate change, of gender, of kind of these kind of cultural heritage, biological heritage, all these different issues, and basically not necessarily to try and solve them, but just to try and get across the intricacy of this problem, that it requires really complicated solutions. And one thing I really love about this project is that it's not the School of Archaeology doing anything really. It's the School of Archaeology, it's architecture, it's biology through ecology, it's world heritage, and as many other people as want to join in. It's shown that actually these multidisciplinary approaches actually are a way for us to begin to think about the solutions, and that we all come at this from different vantages. So just like the house, we all came at it from one different vantage, but at the end of it, we produced this really amazing understanding of people and culture and climate through the structure. So hopefully we get to do that this year, COVID willing. Next year, not this year, next year. I'm jumping ahead.
Thank you, Brendan. Any further questions? Probably got time for one more.
Hi. Sorry, I just put a question in the chat there, and I was wondering. Sorry. Yeah, I was wondering if Brendan, if you ever saw any of the women making any pottery or any of the vessels that they use in the home, and I was wondering if you could talk a bit about what you saw when they were making them and the process they followed.
And thank you, it's actually a great question. So as an archaeologist, I sat there just staring at material culture, or trying to kind of get a sense of this the whole time. In terms of pottery, traditionally the Samburu actually don't make pottery themselves. Instead, a kind of a closely related group of people called the Dorobo, who are called kind of in a lot of ethnographic or early anthropological studies as hunter-gatherers. They make pottery and trade this pottery with the Samburu. They trade pottery and alcohol in exchange for things like milk products, this kind of stuff. The Dorobo, for the most part, were forced to integrate into the Samburu several decades ago, and so you will see them dress an awful lot like Samburu. To my eyes, it's very difficult to distinguish, but they kind of exist within Samburu communities. And we met some Dorobo who do make pottery. Unfortunately, as much as I tried to orchestrate the situation where I could make pottery with a Dorobo lady, it wasn't possible. She wasn't forthcoming with it. And this leads to a kind of an interesting point that I didn't think would be an issue, is because, and again, from the point of view of an archaeologist, almost all the material culture in this community is made by the women. The houses, the gourds, the elaborate beading that you can see the women wear around their neck, and the pottery itself. And as a man over the age of 30, unfortunately, I was considered an elder and not allowed to really engage in any activity that was outside my gender. So when it came to making the house, I tried to participate a couple of times, and I really felt in the first few days I was kind of being sidelined and shouldered out of things. I tried to make cordage one day with one of the women. She just took it off me and laughed and kind of dismissed me. And I thought maybe it was me, but I suddenly realized that it's not me. This society, this culture couldn't perceive of me actually contributing. I showed them pictures of me as well, making roundhouses and pottery at home, and they just laughed at the fact that I was the one making these things. And so while I would have loved to have spent time making pottery and witnessing this, it wasn't possible. But there is pottery within their culture, and very interesting how it comes into the culture and how it's used. Unfortunately, my wife was also with us on the trip, and she was actually invited to go and look at pottery and things like this. But unfortunately, I wasn't. So, but thank you. It's a very good question, actually.
Thank you. That was really helpful. Thanks.
Brendan, thank you very much. We're very nearly out of time. I might just close this part of it just by saying you talked there, Brendan, about how complicated all of this was, how interconnected it was, and how it was great to have as many people as involved in this project as you could. And this is such an Earth Institute kind of project and idea, exploring these issues. If colleagues did want to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that and talk about these things?
Oh, I mean, just drop me a line from my email, brendan.o'neill@ucd.ie, or contact me through the school. I mean, the best person to go to is actually our dear leader in this project, who's Samantha Martin McAuliffe, who coordinates a huge range of all these things. And again, I suppose I'd just like to express my appreciation to her for first inviting me onto this, and as well for really being the sustaining force behind this project. It's been absolutely amazing to work with her.
Excellent. Congratulations to both of you then. So it just remains at the moment to ask you all to show your appreciation to Brendan for a talk in the, well, I would say the usual way, but use whichever emoji or symbol you want to put on the screen or into the chat box overall. My thanks to you all for contributing to Earth Institute Coffee Mornings and helping us keep this community going over the course of what's been at least a slightly unusual trimester, sorry, catching up for myself in terms of language. We'll see you at some stage in January for the next of these events. So I wish you a successful end of trimester and hopefully something of a break over Christmas itself. So thanks to you all, and bye-bye.